seated. So last week we heard about wheat and tares. The week before it was the parable of the sower. And today we heard about mustard seeds, yeast and treasure and pearls. But why all these parables, and what are they about, and what do they mean? Well, there are 23 parables in the Gospel of Matthew. Not quite as many as in Luke, because there's 24 in Luke. But there are 8 parables in Matthew 13, which is what we've been hearing over the last few weeks. And they all start with the kingdom of heaven. They begin with that sentence, the kingdom of heaven. And those parables have very different interpretations, but certainly raise questions about our own faith. And Jesus' parables are seemingly simple and memorable stories, often with imagery. And this imagery is really important because if we contextualise it, we think about the time in which these parables were being told. There was no books, there was no pictures, nobody could read, so they were of real significance. And they teach a lesson about our daily lives. And scholars have commented that although the parables seem very simple, they have a very deep and powerful message to convey and central to the teaching of Jesus. And Christian authors often view them as not as mere similarities, but that they serve the purpose of that detailed illustration and as an internal analogy with nature becoming a witness for the spiritual world. And as we see that today with the yeast and the mustard seed. So today we heard that the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in the field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree so that the birds of the air come and make nest in the branches. Now, you've often heard that phrase, haven't you? From little things, big things grow. And usually we hear it in relation to an acorn. People talk about from tiny acorns, oak trees grow. And it's normally in relation to personal development, the development of people, or in association with a project of goodwill that has humble beginnings. But many of the best ideas and organisations begin with humble beginnings, but grow to something that benefit many. So there is a correlation between the phrase, from little things, big things grow, and what Jesus is expressing about the kingdom of heaven coming to fruition from something as small as a tiny mustard seed. Because this seed is so tiny, it grows into a shrub of about 10 feet high. And Jesus said this is a picture of kingdom growth. And the point of the parable of this mustard seed is that something big and blessed, the kingdom of God, had humble beginnings. Now, how significant could the short ministry of Christ be? He had but a handful of followers. He was a man of no rank, without means, and he lived in what everybody considered to be a backwater region of the world. In fact, I think in John's Gospel, somebody said, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" But I don't know who said it, so somebody can tell me later. And the life and death of Christ did not catch the world's attention any more than that tiny mustard seed on the side of the road. But this was a work of God. What seemed inconsequential at first grew into a movement of worldwide influence, and no one could stop it. The influence of the kingdom in this world would be such that everyone associated with it would benefit. Pictured as the birds perched on the branches of that mature mustard seed tree. So then we heard about another parable, and it said, the kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. So here Jesus is challenging his listeners in the way they think about God. Yeast is something so small that is practically invisible and yet has the potential to grow significantly, making dough to rise dramatically before it is baked into bread. And the parable describes what happens when this woman adds leaven, which is old fermented dough, which contains yeast, to a large quantity of flour and water, a lot of water, and the living organism in the leavened bread grow overnight, so that by the morning the entire quantity of dough has significantly risen greatly. And this parable resonated with me for more than one reason. I happen to have a bit of an interest in bread. Now, there are a plethora of different breads you can buy now, but I remember as a child, and there's a lot of people here in the congregation that will also remember, you'd go into a shop and you'd ask for, when we were young, white bread. Have you got a loaf of bread? And it would very often be white. There wasn't really a choice, and then there was a choice of brown bread, so it was white bread or brown bread. But there was none of this multigrain, wholemeal, seeded, sourdough. There was none of that. That's kind of extra. Yeah.
Sourdough is leaven.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm coming to. Yes, indeed. And well done, Geraldine. So we can see now that this dough that the lady was mixing in the story is now what we call sourdough bread. And it is an acquired taste for that very reason. And I love it, I absolutely love it. But the story here is that sourdough bread is very good for you too. Very good for the digestive system. Because it is fermented, it doesn't ferment in your stomach. It is fermented outside. It's left 48 hours to proof, and therefore it's good for you. So this bread not only rises enormously, but it has its benefits. Buying and eating sourdough bread, for me, is a lifestyle, as is my faith. And you can choose to embrace and follow it. So, later in Matthew 13, we then hear about the parable of the hidden treasure, and you'd be interested to know this is the last parable I'm going to talk about. And now again, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and hid. In his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Now, the hidden treasure, the nature of that hidden treasure, might indicate that the kingdom of heaven is not yet revealed to everyone, or that the kingdom of God is not easily found. Some people take a lot longer to find God. It's not always an easy thing to obtain as such. And that knowing God is the greatest of all treasures. It could mean that. Jesus is making the point that knowing and being known by God, being in the right relationship with him, and being a part of his kingdom under his lordship is the greatest treasure above all treasures. And also it could mean that God is worth everything we have. Over time you come to realise that there is nothing that you want more than to have God in your life. Your money is his, your time is his, your dreams are his. Your relationship are with him. And that is worship, realising that everything your heart has desired is in him. And being willing to lay everything down so that you might have more of him. So, to summarise, we've heard 3 theologically very rich parables. As here Jesus gives the parables to describe the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven. And some people search for God, as we've said, and eventually find it, but it can take a long time, and then others find it a lot sooner. So there's one powerful message. But the other powerful messages are about how we live our own lives. And they can be interpreted as how we view the kingdom of heaven, for example. How does our faith grow and expand like that mustard seed or the yeast? And what value do we have on our faith and God? And I think more poignantly is that some small action can grow into something very big. So that small act of kindness, that smile when you walk into church, or that welcome, or showing somebody an act of kindness that needs help, can develop into bigger things because it has a great impact on that person that's receiving that. So these are certainly stories that we can reflect on. Amen.